Okay, Parshas Bo. Vayom Hashem Moshe Bo El Paro. Parshas Bo, 3 makos. Arbe, Choshech, Makas Becharos. We're going to see what we can figure out tonight about those 3 makos. The first mako, Arba. Arba means locust. Locust eats everything. They come in a swarm, they eat everything. So in the Sefer Otzer Palos HaTorah, it brings down from the Ramban, but also from Rabbeinu Bachai, in the name of Rabbeinu Hananel. And he says that when Moshe davened to Hashem and said, take away the locust from Mitzrayim, his tefillah was so strong that Hashem said, not only will I take the locust away, but there'll never ever be locust again in Egypt. Now that's amazing, because there's locusts in the Sudan, there's locusts in the Sahara, there's locusts in Israel. There have been locusts all through the Middle East. But for whatever the reason, from then until now, there has never been locust in Egypt. That's what the Rabbeinu Hananel says. He's one of the Gaonim. And the Imre Baruch, he asks why. He says, what did Egypt do to get this locust insurance policy? That's what it is. It's an insurance policy. No more locust. He says, because Mitzrayim was part of a Kiddush Hashem. When the Makot came and they got so beaten up, the whole world saw the greatness of Hashem. Bless you.
Thank you.
So because Mitzrayim became part of a Kiddush Hashem, even though they were deserving it and they got punished and they got what they deserved, but Hashem is so careful, Nemon l'shalem schar, to pay the reward of every person, that Hashem said, because you were a participant in this Kiddush Hashem, that now Paro says there is a God, I have to reward you. What's the reward? Thinking what to do? I'll tell you what. No more locust in Mitzrayim. And because of that, Rabbeinu Hananel says, from then until now, there was never ever a plague of locusts. And he brings down a story here. There's a story from a sefer called Kav HaYoshar that was found in the writings of the Arizal. Listen to this story. The Arizal lived in which city? Do you know which city? Tzfat. So the Arizal is living in the city of Tzfat, and it says that he was by the grave, near the grave of Hoshea ben Be'eri, one of the Nevi'im. And he was there with his Talmidim, and they were learning Kabbalah. It says Sisrei Torah, the hidden secrets of the Torah. Okay? They're learning the hidden secrets of the Torah. All of a sudden, the Arizal stops, and he says, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. There's a swarm of locusts headed straight for Tzfas. Why? He says there's a fellow, Rabbi Yaakov Altruiz, who is crying bitter tears because he's so poor that he has no food. And therefore Hashem is saying, if the city of Tzfat cannot look after the food needs of this person, I'll take away all your food. And the locust is going to come, and it's coming. The locust is coming to Tzfat. He immediately told his students that we're going to stop learning, go and collect as much money as you can. And they run out to collect money, and he gives the money to one of the students, Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen, to go immediately to the house of Rabbi Yaakov Altruiz and try to placate him, try to make him feel comfortable. As he's going, the wind is already swirling, and he sees in the distance an enormous black cloud. A swarm of locusts looks like a black cloud that's moving at high speed. He runs to the house of this gentleman who's sitting crying because his last pitcher, he had a little pitcher of water, slipped out of his hand and broke. Now he has nothing to with water, and he has no water, he has nothing. And he gives him the money, and he's so happy to receive the money, he says to him, please daven to Hashem to cancel the locust. And he davens, he says, thank you, they saved me. And he comes back to the Ari, and the Ari says, The gezerah was batel. But the students are looking, and the wind is still howling, and the black cloud is still coming at record speed towards Tzfat. And he brings down that the cloud swarmed over the city of Tzfat and did a U-turn and went back out to the Mediterranean, and the locusts drowned in the Mediterranean. And he brings down over here the Arizal. The Arizal says, Mikan, he says, from here, Ashara Gadola l'chol b'nei Israel, caution to all Jewish people. Sheyitnu hashgacha pratit al aniyim ve'evyonim. Be very careful for the poor in your city.
For the what?
For the poor people in your city. Be very careful, very cautious. Make sure they're taken care of. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a soft spot for poor people. And if they cry out, the consequences are devastating. You know, we have social services, you know, we have food stamps and we have Section 8. You know, in the Torah you don't have any of that, but you did have that. You had leket, shicha, peah, you had truma, you had maser, you had gifts that were constantly given to the poor. So the Torah has a system where the poor were very, very carefully taken care of. And the Arizal says you have to be very, very careful, because the consequences of closing your eyes and your ears to the poor are devastating. Now let's go a little bit further. The next thing I'm going to tell you is shocking and yet amazing in its own way. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, good evening. Netei yodcha al hashamayim. Lift your hand up to the heavens. V'hi choshech al eretz Yisrael. There'll be darkness in Egypt. Vayomesh choshech. So Sarah, tell us, what was choshech? What kind of a plague was choshech? Darkness. So it's very interesting to hear what some people say the darkness is. And you'll be surprised by the last answer. There is a pirush on the Chumash called Torah Temimah. Okay, Rabbi Epstein, Torah Temimah. And the Torah Temimah writes that he's afraid to say this. He says, Lule de mistafina, I'm afraid to say something radical. But you know what I think the darkness was? It wasn't dark where it was black outside. The Egyptians had a piece of skin grow over their eyes, like a cataract. So they were blind. They couldn't see. And because they couldn't see and they were not used, they were scared, so they stayed home. And they could touch it. It says you could feel the darkness. How do you feel darkness? You can't feel darkness. He says, but you could touch the skin. They could feel it on their eye. They couldn't get rid of it. So it was, and that's why all the Jews had light. Because the sun was shining, it was light. But they were blind. Like had a shade, a piece of skin over, they were blind. That's what the Torah Temimah says. A fascinating answer. The Ralbag, another Pirush, says, no, I don't buy that. He says the Choshech, the night, was a thick mist, like a fog. And the fog was so thick, you could feel it, because it's a vapor. Mm-hmm. Have you ever driven at night when there's a fog? You don't know what to do. If you use your lights, it blinds you. If you put on your bright lights, it blinds you even more because it reflects the light. Yeah. He says it was so bad, the fog, that the vapor was poisonous. That people, if they went out into the fog, used to wear a mask. They would cover their mouth and their nose not to breathe it in. Because when you breathe it in, it was like toxic. It was a toxic type fog. And you have some of this in marshes, in low-lying marshes, where it comes up from the water of fog and it's choking. So he says that's what they could feel. It was a fog so thick they could feel it. The next thing is an amazing pirush. It's from the Me'am Loez. Now you have a Me'am Loez set in the back. You have it in English and it comes in Hebrew. The Me'am Loez says something that you may be surprised about, Sarah. He says, you want to know what this Choshech was? It was light. Hashem took the sun that he created at the beginning of the world and he took it out of storage, and that's what shined on all of Mitzrayim. Remember, Paro questioned Hashem. I created the world, he said. Hashem said, really? Let's see if you can create the world. Vahi choshech, and Hashem put back the sun from creation. Why did Hashem take that sun away? The original sun was so bright. Why did Hashem take it away? Because people couldn't tolerate the light. If you were a tzaddik, you could absorb it and grow. But if you were a rasha, what did the light do to you? It killed you. So he says Hashem took the light. So the Egyptians couldn't go outside. It was so bright, they were blind. You know, if you have the sun shining in your eyes, can you see anything? Nothing. He says the tzaddikim of the Jews, it didn't bother. But the Rishaim of the Jews, what happened to them? They died. And that's why 4/5 died. They died from the light of Gan Eden. He says, when did that light come back a second time? At Har Sinai. Har Sinai was covered in light. It was the same sun. And that's when they got the Torah. And that's why we say Torah or. Torah is light.
So sun was more lighter, more
That's
brighter.
right. The sun was brighter. And the brighter sun didn't mean more heat. It wasn't heat, but it was light. And if you ever have a shining bright light in your face, you're just as blind. But the Jews who were not tzaddikim, who didn't want to leave Mitzrayim, they died. Then he brings down the Zohar. Listen to this Zohar. I'll read it to you. The Zohar is in Parasha Shemos. Kishayavo HaMashiach. When Mashiach comes, for 15 days, Hashem is going to take that light out again. Everybody who said, I was believed in Mashiach, I was waiting for Mashiach, the light won't bother them. But any Jew who during their lifetime says, I don't believe in this Mashiach is nonsense, I'm not interested in Mashiach, if Mashiach comes, I'm going to stay in America because I'm happy in America, the light will destroy them. That's what the Zohar writes. He says, V'yomusu risha'ei Yisrael she'enam rotzim b'geula. That's what the Zohar writes. So in this case, Makas Choshech did not mean darkness. It meant bright light that blinded the person as if it was darkness. Fascinating answer. Fascinating. Okay.
So which one is from these 3 points?
It's different perushim. You know, ayin panim la Torah. There's 70 different facets to the Torah. Okay. HaChodesh hazeh lechem Rosh Chadoshim. We have this week the mitzvah of Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana. Hopefully you all did Kiddush Levana, making the bracha on the new moon. In the olden days, that's how they decided when each new month began. And of course, the first month is Nisan. And we mentioned that it was a brand new creation, therefore Nisan became the new Rosh Hashanah. Rabbeinu Bachai says as follows. He says, for the 40 years the Jews were in the desert, they never once did Kiddush Levana. Hashem, when they were leaving Egypt, said, I'm going to give you a mitzvah, Kiddush Levana. They get into the desert, now it's the new month, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, Sivan, nothing, no Kiddush Levana. They had to go by a calendar. They had to go by our system of a calendar. Rabbeinu Bachai says there was no Kiddush Levana. When asked, why was there no Kiddush Levana? What's the answer?
Cloud.
They were surrounded by clouds.
Yeah, you can't see nothing.
They didn't see the sun for 40 years. They didn't see the moon. So Rabbeinu Bachai says they couldn't do Kiddush Levana. There was no sun, there was no moon. They were surrounded on all 4 sides of the clouds. The Nitziv says, so why didn't they walk out of the clouds? The clouds are around the camp. Why don't you just walk out? He says you couldn't. Because if you walked out, the clouds still surrounded you. It was like a force field.
Yeah.
Wherever you went, the clouds surrounded you.
Protection.
It was protection. How Yisro got in is not so simple. He couldn't get in. He shot an arrow, and it went to Moshe's uncle, and he found the arrow, and they asked, can we go out and bring him in? It was a whole procedure. Yisro couldn't get in. He was out there with Sipporah, and he couldn't get in. We'll find that out in a few weeks when we do Parshas Yisro. He couldn't get in. So the Nitziv says they couldn't go out. It wouldn't have made a difference. Some people say that Moshe Rabbeinu davened right around Kiddush Levana time, Hashem, please open up the clouds so we can do Kiddush Levana. There's an opinion that says that. And we have stories of Hasidic rabbis who went out on the 14th, and it was already the last day to do Kiddush Levana, and it was cloudy. And they said to Hashem, we want to do your mitzvahs, why won't you let us? And the clouds opened up and they saw the moon.
Wow.
So we have cases like that. The Yalkut Shimoni brings down from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Says, and unbelievable, he says, for 40 years they had no sun and they had no moon. So a person went into a tent. It was dark. It was nighttime. And he was looking for something under the bed. The minute he bent down under the bed, a light opened up, like a flashlight. So he could look. When he finished, the light went out. He got up, the light went up. He says the clouds were like flashlights. And they followed the Jews wherever they went. And if they needed something, if they were walking, it was nighttime, and they needed to write something on a piece of paper, all of a sudden, like there was a spotlight, like on an airplane. You push a button, you get a light. You got a light. Oh, here it is. They could read it. Thank you. Close it, put it in the pocket. Light went out. He says, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that, and in Sifri also, that all 40 years, lo nitzruchu laner. They didn't even need a candle. Elo afilu nichnas adam cheder lifnim min hacheder. They went into the storage house inside a storage house, room inside a room. Kamo panas nichnasim, like a flashlight. Panas is the Hebrew word for flashlight. They didn't use the word flashlight in the Sefer. They didn't know what a flashlight was 2,000 years ago. But it was like a flashlight. Until they finished looking. And that followed them wherever they went. So they did not see the sun, they did not see the moon. For 40 years they were in a climate-controlled environment, and everything was protected. Okay, what is the reward for doing Kiddush Levana? We talk about the mitzvah of Kiddush Levana. What is the reward? What reward does Hashem give you for Kiddush Levana?
Life.
So it's interesting, it's a little different than life. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, it's brought down in Mishnah Berurah, that the reward for Kiddush Levana is that you don't die that month.
Yes.
Now, Rabbi Schwab in Washington Heights was very strict on the mitzvah of Kiddush Levana. And he believed you have to do the mitzvah at the first possible opportunity, which is day 3. Some people wait till day 7 or day 8. He never waited. On Tishrei, some people do Kiddush Levana after Yom Kippur, Motzei Yom Kippur. He never waited. He did it on day 3. It's Tzom Gedalia. On Av, people wait till after Tisha B'Av. He did it on day 3. He said that the reward for doing Kiddush Levana is Hashem protects you that whole month. So therefore, the sooner you do it, the better. When did he die? He died on the 2nd day of the month, before he could do Kiddush Levana.
I was doing 1 day later.
1 day later. He had to wait 1 more day to the Kiddush Levana. He never made it to that day, and therefore he died 1 day early. So he died, I think, on the 2nd day of the month. But that's what Rosh Schwab said. The Gemara says that the Sanhedrin, right? The Sanhedrin sat in a semicircle like the moon. The Sanhedrin, when they sat in front of the head of the Sanhedrin, they didn't sit in a straight row. It was a semicircle. It looked like the moon. It had the shape of a moon. He says the sun, represents the nations of the world. Because the sun is stationary, it's fixed, it doesn't move. The moon rotates, it moves, grows, it doesn't go. Am Yisrael is like the moon. Because we're in a constant state of growth. That means we have to be better Ovdei Hashem. Some of us, over the course of time, have to learn to be better husbands. The women are saying yes. Some of us have to be better wives. Now the men are saying yes. Some of us need to be better parents. Not in your case, because they can't get any better than they are. But some of us have to be better parents. Some of us have to learn to daven better, to learn better. That's what the moon is. The moon is a message that we're not stationary. Just because we acted a certain way for our whole life doesn't mean we have to continue acting that way. People can change, not easy. People can change. I deal with people every day who can't change for some strange reason, and I have to deal with those problems. But people are supposed to be able to change. It's interesting that the word levana is the same letters that says libana to your children. That means we live our lives to better help our children. Now, amongst Ashkenazim, you know what we say after Kiddush Levana? When Kiddush Levana is over, we say Oleinu L'Shabeach. You know what Oleinu L'Shabeach is? It's tefillah that we say at the end of davening. Why do you think we say Oleinu L'Shabeach?
They say that some water.
Do you say it? The Sfardim say
No.
Oleinu? We say Oleinu L'Shabeach, and then we say I have Kaddish. Do you say Kaddish at all after it?
Yeah,
Full.
Okay,
Full.
Al Yisrael, you say Kaddish.
We say after, we say, Haya Ora Alibana Kora Hama.
Right, and then you say Kaddish. We say Oleinu L'Shabeach, fascinating reason why. Imagine you have 50 people out there davening to the moon. What does it look like? Avodah Zarah, we're moon worshippers.
Yeah.
In the olden days, they were sun worshippers. So what do we say? Oleinu l'shabech la'adon hakol, to Hashem. And we say, Hu Elokeinu einod. Oleinu is a tefillah that over and over says, Hashem is God, Hashem is the King, He created the world. Because it looks funny. We're outside, even in the wintertime.
People think crazy.
We think we're crazy. We're davening to the moon. We're now moon worshippers. So in order to get around that, we say Oleinu l'shabeach.
It sounds like we say for the Torah when we bring this.
Correct. We say right. You know, we try to show that with the different.
It's the Hasidim that turn away when they say the Baruch, they turn away from the moon and.
Correct, because they don't want to look like they're davening to the moon,
Yeah.
and that's why the minhag came to say Oleinu l'shabeach. We do the bracha on the moon when the moon is small. That shows a sign of anava, of humility. We don't want to do it when the moon is big because that's gava, that's haughtiness. So we do it a little bit when the moon is small. Okay, the next thing I'm going to tell you is also going to amaze you, but it's a good thing I'm telling it in a group of minhag Sfarad people. Because when I tell it to you, you'll understand that I'm right and you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. You ready for this? This is going to blow you away. You got this, right? You ready for this? You going to be able to handle this? Okay.
So far.
The Korban Pesach. It was a sheep. The Torah says, Al tochlu mimenu no, you can't eat it raw. Well, that makes sense. Uvoshel muvushel b'mayim, and you can't cook it in a pot with water. How did you prepare the Korban Pesach?
Open the
On a fire, barbecue.
Yeah.
Like a shish kebab, right?
Yes.
A real shish kebab. Like a shwama shish kebab.
Well done.
Ki in tzliesh. Rosho, you have to leave the head on. Al kira'ov, with the feet and the tail. Al kirbo, with all the insides. Now that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Cook with the insides?
Yeah, all
Yeah.
things.
With the guts,
Everything.
with everything?
Just the way it
You
is.
have to take the skin out?
Omar HaRambam, the Rambam writes in Hilchos Korban Pesach, he says, you do not touch the animal on the inside. You do not open it up to pull out the inside guts. You do not take out the forbidden fat. You do not take out the veins and the muscles or get rid of the blood. You cook it as is. On the Rambam, there was a Pirush who disagreed with the Rambam. That was called the Ravid, the Ravid. And he has, in the Rambam, he puts Aleph, Omar Avraham. His name was Avraham. Look at what the Ravid writes. Omar Avraham, B'chaye Roshi, in my life, he says, Ein Isser Godel Mizeh. What the Rambam is suggesting is so treif, I've never had something as forbidden as what the Rambam says. Sheyitzala HaPesach, he cooks the Pesach with everything in there, even the Gid HaNosha. It violates every law in the Torah. The Rambam doesn't know what he's talking about. V'im azake, he says, if I'm lucky, v'ochel Pesach, and I live till Mashiach comes, and there's going to be a Korban Pesach, v'yovi lefonai kazeh, and the Rambam would bring me his Korban Pesach, hoyisi chovto bakarka lefonov, I would throw it on the ground and jump on it and trample it into the ground and say, treif, treif, treif.
So what did the Rambam mean?
So, first of all, the Chidah comes in over here, and the Chidah says, why is this guy so angry? Why is he so agitated? That means the Rambam is a nice guy. You don't agree with him. Listen, you can say something, I don't have to agree with you, but I don't have to start screaming and yelling and jumping up and down and calling you the worst shagets, the worst goy since the beginning of time. So he says the Chidah wants to know, why is this guy so agitated? Why is he so upset at the Rambam? So the Chidah writes, you gotta listen to this, the Chidah writes that people, when they saw the Rambam's books, you know what they said? It was so perfectly written. We don't have to learn Mishnah anymore, we don't have to learn Gemara, we don't have to learn Shulchan Aruch, we don't have to learn anything, just the Rambam. And if we learn the Rambam, we know the entire Torah. And that drove the Ravid crazy. He says, what? Yeah, I used to buy my chatan a shas. Guy gets married, you buy him a shas. And now I'm just buying him a set of Rambam. You don't need anything but the Rambam. Okay? I mean, I started off that way when I was by my bar mitzvah. I wanted a shas. Which kid doesn't want a shas?
Shas.
A shas means all the Gemaras. I said, they have it now small. It's not that expensive.
All set.
My father said to me, he says, you want a shas? I know you do. So my father says, I got a gift for you. My father bought me for my bar mitzvah a set of Rambam. Now I'm an Ashkenazi guy. I didn't know what he was doing. But I bought all my sons. When my sons became bar mitzvah, I bought them a Rambam. And when my grandchildren become bar mitzvah, each one gets a Rambam.
New Rambam.
A new Rambam.
How big is it? Is it like?
7 volumes, 8 volumes.
How big is it? Is it like small?
No, it's about this size. Decent Rambam. I only had one grandson so far that got bar mitzvah. The oldest one, he bought a Rambam. And my 3 sons got bar mitzvah. They all got Rambams.
So yours was the biggest. The
Yeah,
sixth.
but I still bought a Rambam.
Before Yiras Shamayim.
You know what? I, with all due respect to the Ravid screaming and yelling, I got to admit, the Rambam, it's unbelievable to go through the Rambam. It's an amazing experience. He's right. See, when I went through the Rambam, I told you this, I first went through all of Mishnayos one more time. I reviewed all Shisha Sidrei Mishnah just to prepare myself. When I went through the Rambam, I saw right away, I don't need anything. I could take my whole library and put it away and just leave the Rambam. He covers everything. There's nothing not including the Rambam. So the Chidah says that's what the problem is. However, he says, what's the Rambam thinking? Okay, let's go into the Rambam.
Yes.
When you roast something, do you have to salt it to get rid of the blood? The answer is really no. We kosher liver by roasting, right? So when you roast it, it draws all the flavor out. So the Rambam says, what's your problem? The blood, it's gone. The forbidden fat, it's gone. The Gid HaNosha gives no flavor. Ein bagidim b'nosin tam. They have no flavor. I didn't say eat it that way. After it's cooked, you cut it open and you clean it all out and you get rid of the Gid HaNosha and everything. Then you cut up the meat in little pieces and everybody gets a little piece. So now the Rambam says, but why do you cook it this way? Why do you cook it whole?
Yeah, a lot.
He says, I'll tell you why he says. Why did they take the sheep? What was the purpose of taking the sheep? So the Egyptians should see what?
They idol worship.
Their idol worship, and we're taking it and we're going to kill it and you can't stop me. So the Rambam says, if you cut off the head and the tail and you clean it all
I
out,
believe.
it doesn't look like a sheep anymore. It could be a cow, it could be a goat. Once you do that, if I go to the store and show you meat in the butcher shop, tell you, is that sheep? You don't know. So the Rambam says you can't touch it. You have to cook it so everybody who sees it says, that's a sheep. After it's cooked, he says, then you cut it up. So the Rambam never said eat the Gid HaNosha, or eat the blood, or eat the forbidden fat. He never said any of
What
that.
about the waste that's inside? It's going to be terrible.
So you know what? The Rambam feels that it was so encased and it was on the bottom that it all just dripped out and down. And then you opened it up, cleaned it all out, and you took the meat from on top. He says it never bothered, it never affected it. He says when you roast, it's sho'ev, the fire draws it down.
Even the waste?
Even the waste. He says you put the fire in the bottom, it draws it all down, it doesn't affect the meat at all. So the Ravid goes meshuga, has a hairy, that's what we call it, has a blow up, right? Has a meltdown. The Ravid has a meltdown, and the Rambam knows exactly what he's doing. Okay. In the end of Masechet Avodah Zarah, if you look in Shas, there's a Masechet Avodah Zarah. In the back, there are small Masechtot. One is called Masechet Kala. One is called Pirkei Avot. You all know Pirkei Avot. One is called Masechet Smochot. The Masechet on Simcha, on joy. What laws does it discuss? Do you know?
Avilut.
Avelut. It's called Masechet Smochot, but it's not talking about joy. It's talking about Avelut,
Moed
mourning.
Katan.
What?
Moed Katan.
Moed Katan. So he says over here, Avel Rabosi Hanikra Masechet Smochot Perik Rishon has an introduction. You got to listen to this. You can't make this stuff up. So I photocopied it because you got to